Rain poured heavily the night Alexander Kane's car skidded off the cliffside road. He had been driving alone, returning from a business meeting in the countryside. His phone buzzed with urgent calls, but he ignored them, focused on the winding road. A deer jumped out, causing him to swerve violently and lose control. The crash was loud, metallic, and final. Glass shattered and darkness followed. Emergency responders arrived hours later, finding him unconscious but alive. He was rushed to St. Jude's Medical Center with multiple injuries and a grim prognosis. As he lay in the ICU, unaware of the world, his fate began to change. Amelia Hart was the night nurse assigned to Alexander's care. She'd read about him, one of the richest men in the country, known for his cold demeanor. To her, though, he was just another patient in need of healing and attention. His chart showed fractures, internal injuries, and possible brain trauma. She carefully adjusted his IV, monitoring every vital sign with precision. Her touch was gentle, her voice calm, even though he couldn't hear her. Colleagues whispered about how lucky she was to care for a billionaire. But Amelia saw a man clinging to life, not a wallet with a name. Days passed, and Alexander drifted in and out of consciousness. The first thing he noticed was Amelia's soft humming as she changed his bandages. Her presence was consistent, always calm in the face of his pain. He tried to speak once, but only managed a groan. Amelia leaned close and whispered, "You're safe now, Mr. Kane." The words stayed with him long after she left the room. Though disoriented, he started recognizing her as the face of comfort. Even in agony, he felt strangely at peace when she was nearby. Alexander's recovery was slow, filled with painful physical therapy sessions. He had once commanded boardrooms but now struggled to sit up. Amelia became a fixture in his routine, encouraging him gently but firmly. "You're stronger than you think," she said, helping him walk his first few steps. He hated feeling weak, but her encouragement softened the sting of failure. At night, he found himself waiting for her shift to begin. He asked her name during one session, and she smiled, replying softly, "Amelia." It was the first time he smiled since the accident. Their conversations began as brief exchanges about medication and progress. But Alexander, intrigued by her kindness, started asking about her life. Amelia was hesitant at first, keeping things professional and distant. Eventually, she shared that she'd been a nurse for 5 years. She told him about growing up in a small town and losing her mother young. Alexander listened more than he spoke, fascinated by her sincerity. Their bond grew quietly, like a flame hidden from the wind. It was no longer just about healing his body. It was about mending his heart. Rumors started to swirl among the hospital staff. Whispers of their growing closeness were passed between shifts. Some nurses rolled their eyes, others found it romantic. Amelia ignored the gossip and focused on her duties. Alexander, once known for his temper, now showed patience and warmth. He even thanked an orderly for adjusting his bed, which stunned everyone. It was as though Amelia's compassion was reshaping him from within. He began to ask himself, was he falling for her? One morning, Amelia found a small handwritten note by her locker. It was from Alexander, thanking her for her care and kindness. She smiled, touched by the gesture, though unsure what it meant. Later that day, he asked her to sit with him during lunch. Though hesitant, she agreed, and they talked for nearly an hour. Their conversation shifted easily from jokes to dreams to regrets. It was the first time Amelia saw vulnerability in the billionaire. She realized she looked forward to seeing him more than she should. Alexander's physical therapy took him outside, the hospital wing, for the first time. Amelia accompanied him to the garden, pushing his wheelchair gently. The flowers were in bloom, and the scent of lavender filled the air. They sat beneath a tree, talking about things that had nothing to do with medicine. Alexander confessed that he hadn't had a real friend in years. Amelia smiled and said, "Maybe it's time you let someone in." He looked at her then, not as his nurse, but as something more. His heart, once armored in pride, began to crack open. As Alexander improved, hospital administrators considered transferring him to a private facility. He surprised them all by insisting on staying at St. Jude's. He told them he trusted the staff, but the truth lay deeper. He couldn't bear the thought of leaving Amelia just yet. One evening, he asked if she would ever leave nursing. She shook her head and said, "Helping people is where I belong." Alexander admired her dedication, knowing his world was one of ambition, not compassion. He wondered if their lives could ever truly align. The tension between them was undeniable, yet unspoken. A simple touch on the arm lingered longer than necessary. Their eyes met more often. Conversations grew more personal. Still, they kept the line between nurse and patient mostly intact. Amelia feared crossing it would ruin everything she'd worked for. Alexander, once emotionally distant, now dreaded the day he'd be discharged. He wanted to explore what was blooming between them. But for now, their connection remained wrapped in silence and hope. Alexander's condition continued to improve at an impressive rate. Doctors credited his progress to determination, but he knew Amelia played a key role. She brought out the best in him, even on days he felt hopeless. They laughed more now, shared inside jokes and quiet moments. But their growing closeness started to weigh on Amelia's conscience. She couldn't ignore the hospital's strict policy against emotional involvement. One evening she pulled back, becoming noticeably distant with Alexander. He noticed immediately, and it stung more than his healing wounds. Confused and frustrated, Alexander confronted her in the therapy room. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked, his voice tinged with hurt. Amelia sighed, avoiding his gaze, struggling to find the right words. "You didn't. But we can't pretend this is normal," she replied. Alexander understood the risks, but hated the thought of losing her. "I don't care about the rules," he said quietly. "But I do," she responded, her voice soft but firm. Their conversation ended in silence, heavy with unspoken feelings. Alexander spent the next few days in emotional limbo. Amelia remained kind but reserved, keeping her interactions clinical. He missed the warmth in her voice, the spark in her eyes. Loneliness returned like an old enemy, creeping into his thoughts. For the first time in years, he felt powerless, emotionally exposed. Amelia, too, struggled with her feelings, torn between duty and desire. She prayed for strength, unsure if walking away or staying close was the right choice. The hospital felt colder without their shared connection. A new nurse was assigned to assist Alexander during nights. Though professional, she lacked the empathy Amelia offered so effortlessly. Alexander tried to be polite, but the void was obvious. Amelia, watching from afar, felt a pang of jealousy. It surprised her. Jealousy wasn't something she expected to feel. Despite her effort to stay distant, her heart refused to comply. She began checking in on him more often than needed. Every visit reminded her just how much she cared. One afternoon, Amelia found Alexander in the hospital chapel. He sat alone, staring at the stained glass window in deep thought. He looked up and gave her a quiet smile as she approached. "Didn't expect to find you here," she said softly. "I needed a place to think without walls," he replied. They sat together, not saying much but feeling everything. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. In that silent chapel, something between them shifted forever. That night, Amelia couldn't sleep, haunted by what she felt. She knew she was dangerously close to crossing the line, but she also realized she couldn't ignore the truth anymore. Alexander wasn't just another patient. He was someone who saw her. He didn't see her as a nurse or a duty, but as a woman. Amelia hadn't felt that in a long time. She decided to speak to her supervisor, risking everything. It was time to be honest, no matter the consequences. The meeting with her supervisor was tense but respectful. Amelia admitted her growing attachment and offered to be reassigned. Surprisingly, the supervisor listened with understanding and compassion. "This happens more than you think," she said gently. But she reminded Amelia of her ethical obligations. "I can't ignore this, but I'll give you time to decide," she added. Amelia left the office unsure of what came next. She only knew that walking away from Alexander would break her. Meanwhile, Alexander was offered the option to continue recovery at home. His penthouse had been adapted with medical equipment and a private nurse. But he hesitated, unsure if leaving would also mean losing Amelia. He asked to see her before the final decision. In their private moment, he said, "If I leave, I want you with me." Amelia's eyes welled with tears she didn't expect. "I can't be your nurse anymore," she whispered. "But maybe I can be something else," she added softly. Alexander's departure from the hospital was bittersweet. Staff lined the hallway to wish him well, but his eyes searched for Amelia. She appeared at the exit, holding a bouquet of fresh lilies. They didn't speak much. Words seemed too fragile. He gently took the flowers, then her hand. "I'll wait," he said, and Amelia nodded, her heart full of silent promises. The ambulance door closed, but their story was far from over. Back at home, Alexander began a new phase of recovery. His body healed faster than his heart, which missed Amelia deeply. Every room reminded him of her laughter and presence. He tried to distract himself with business calls and strategy meetings, but nothing felt important anymore. Not without her. One night, he stood on his balcony overlooking the city. In that moment of quiet longing, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Amelia. "Can I come over tomorrow?" The next morning, Alexander prepared his home as though royalty were visiting. He instructed his staff to take the day off, wanting privacy. He paced nervously, checking the clock every 5 minutes. When the doorbell rang, he rushed to answer. It himself. There she stood, Amelia, dressed casually, holding a nervous smile. He smiled back, stepping aside to let her in without a word. Neither knew what to say at first, the silence thick with emotion. Finally, Amelia broke it. "I've missed you." They settled into the living room, both visibly overwhelmed but relieved. Alexander poured her tea, his hands slightly trembling. Amelia took a sip and looked around, noticing personal touches she hadn't expected. There were family photos, warm colors, and a lived-in charm to the place. "I thought it would be cold here," she admitted. "It used to be," he replied, watching her carefully. She reached out and touched his hand. "I'm not your nurse anymore. I'm just me now." They began to spend more time together in the weeks that followed. Walks in the park, movie nights, and quiet dinners replaced hospital routines. Without the roles of caregiver and patient, something new began to bloom. Alexander opened up more, sharing stories of his childhood and fears. Amelia, too, let down her guard, showing her strength and her softness. They talked about ethics, reputation, and the risks they both took. But in each other, they found something rare and undeniable. They found a reason to start over, not as strangers, but as equals. One evening, they returned from a charity gala Alexander had invited her to. She looked radiant in a blue dress, and he couldn't take his eyes off her. They danced together, forgetting the world around them. Back home, the moment turned quiet and deeply intimate. They stood on the balcony where Amelia first sent that message. "I never thought I'd fall in love during a job," she whispered. "And I never thought a crash would save me," he replied. Their first kiss came then, slow, certain, and filled with all they had endured. News of their relationship spread, slowly then wildly. Paparazzi captured them together. Headlines ran with speculation. Some admired their story, others criticized Amelia for her role. Despite the noise, they stayed grounded in each other. Alexander held a press conference, speaking candidly about his accident and recovery. He praised Amelia not only for saving his life, but for changing it. "I was a man broken in more ways than one," he said. "She helped me heal the parts medicine couldn't touch." Amelia faced the board of nursing shortly after the media frenzy. She presented her case honestly, showing transparency and professionalism. Colleagues wrote letters in her defense, highlighting her dedication and integrity. After deliberation, the board allowed her to retain her license with conditions. She would step away from hospital duties for a time, but not lose her career. Relieved, Amelia wept as Alexander embraced her outside the hearing. "I didn't do this for a fairy tale," she said. "But it looks like we got one anyway," he replied with a grin. Together, they began planning a future rooted in purpose. Alexander invested in healthcare initiatives, building clinics in underfunded areas. Amelia led the foundation's operations, training staff and overseeing programs. They traveled together to rural towns and distant cities. Each trip reminded them why they had come together in the first place. Love wasn't just in the grand gestures, but in shared vision. They weren't just lovers. They were partners in life and impact. Every challenge they faced only made them stronger. A year later, Alexander proposed on the anniversary of his hospital discharge. He recreated the hospital garden where they once sat beneath the tree. Friends and family gathered, pretending it was a simple anniversary party. But when he dropped to one knee, Amelia gasped and covered her mouth. "I walked again because of you," he said, "but now I want to walk through life with you, every step of the way." Through tears, she nodded, saying, "Yes, 1,000 times. Yes." Cheers erupted as they embraced, surrounded by love and lavender. Their wedding was elegant but heartfelt, attended by those who truly knew their journey. Amelia wore a lace dress that shimmered like morning light. Alexander looked nothing like the wounded man from the ICU. He was whole again. Vows were exchanged in a ceremony filled with laughter and tears. They danced under a canopy of stars, just like their first real night together. "I didn't just gain a husband," Amelia whispered. "I gained my best friend, my partner, my miracle." Alexander smiled, whispering back, "And I gained my heart." Years passed, and their love never dimmed. It deepened. They raised a daughter, Lily, named after the flowers Amelia brought that day. Alexander retired from corporate life, focusing fully on the foundation they built together. Amelia returned to medicine, this time training future nurses with compassion. Their home was always filled with warmth, music, and laughter. Friends often asked what their secret was, and Amelia would always say, "Sometimes love crashes into your life when you least expect it. But the miracle is what you choose to do with it afterward."